Hello and welcome to the Riyal Deal, coming to you from the Arabiya News headquarters. This is your weekly bulletin, bringing you all the very latest business news and headlines and analysis from Saudi Arabia. I'm here with Ali Raza, who is the Chief Investment Officer of the Saudi Arabia Holding Company. Welcome to you.
Hello, Tom. Great to be here.
Great to have you with us. We're going to start by taking a look at the top stories of the last couple of days. As countries around the world weather the tariff storm brought on by the US President Donald Trump, we take a deep dive into the implications of this baseline tax on Saudi Arabia's economy. Coming up, we'll be speaking to the Chief Executive Officer of the Saudi-based clean power generation company ACWA Power. He'll be joining us from Riyadh. And as Tesla opens its first showrooms in Saudi Arabia this week, we take a closer look at the opportunities down the road for electric vehicles in the kingdom. A very warm welcome once again to everyone. I'm here with Ali, who I introduced just a moment ago. Great to have you with us. Really appreciate you coming in to see us. The very first edition of the Riyal Deal, as we've been saying, a new bulletin in English dedicated to business in Saudi Arabia. I mean, a lot of people seem to be really interested in Saudi Arabia, a lot of appetite for information.
Very much so, very much so. We've got a long string of conferences in Saudi Arabia. We've got a range of investment initiatives. There's industrial development that's taking place. The world is paying attention now. And we see that through the conversations that people start with us. And it's very clear that the world is hungry for more insights on what's happening on the ground in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, well, you and I will be anticipating some of the questions and trying to address that interest. We're going to kick off the very first episode of the Riyal Deal with the one and only Mr. Wonderful, aka Kevin O'Leary, the investor and host of the Shark Tank United States, who joins us now from Miami. Kevin O'Leary, investor and host of Shark Tank USA, who joins us now from Miami. Mr. O'Leary, great to have you with us once again, especially for this, our very first episode of the show. We aim to bring the world of Saudi business to a global audience, and I want to start by asking you, what's been your experience of doing business in Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's one of the largest growth areas in the world, and over the last 10 years, the tonality of, investors' attitude has changed completely. I mean, you can see that just by the amount of traffic that any of the trade shows happen or the conventions. It's packed because people really want to understand what the vision is for the next 20 years in Saudi, and it's a very positive tone because there's a lot of stability coming into the way people think. I know the region's been in turmoil, but when you start to hear the vision of the long-term investment opportunity and the growth, it's hard to find it anywhere else in the world. And really, investors pursue growth. That's it. The path of least resistance is the lowest risk with the fastest growth rate. And right now, Saudi's in the top quartile of destinations for that.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but where do you see the kingdom in about 5 years from now?
I think it's going to get a lot more investment in real estate. There seems to be a pretty big opportunity there. Investors like real estate. It's a hard asset. The challenge in developing real estate anywhere, in any region, are the permits, access to water and power. This is, it's a third of our portfolios in real estate, and we're constantly dealing with the pressures of trying to find locations where you have power and you can get permits and you have access to people that can build and provide the engineering and everything else. And so I think in the planning for Saudi, what was done right is check the boxes on all those things. I mean, you can't do it without power, and there's plenty of it, and you need locations where you can get permitted, and the government's done a good job in pointing that out, that they're ready to provide that. So I think it's a pretty, and this takes decades to actually work out, and I think it's very positive now. That's why you're seeing a lot of interest in infrastructure funds and in real estate investors to go check it out.
Mr. O'Leary, a few years ago, you made a comment that I'd like to revive. You said Saudi Arabia is the most misunderstood country in the world, and I think things have changed since. I'd love to hear your opinion on your impression of how the world sees Saudi Arabia now.
I don't think it's changed that much. I think people have come to the conclusion that trying to understand the kingdom by reading reports it doesn't work. You have to get on a plane and go there. You have to actually, as I like to say, marinate in it. You have to go there, and that's very, very important. And I think I tell everybody that's interested in it, I say, look, there's only one thing to do. You've got to take 10 days and go to Riyadh. And just understand that whatever your perception was, it's going to come back changed. And everybody that's done that I've talked to said you were 100% right. So I would advocate that the government have a policy of making it as easy as possible for investors from every jurisdiction to go there. Because my first experience was completely different than what I thought it was going to be, and it got, reconfirmed every time I go. And what's amazing is there's so much change. Even in 6 months, you can see it. And so, I went to the real estate conference recently. I was blown away. I mean, it was just massive, 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 massive. And I ran into investors that I know from Zurich and Geneva and London and, Abu Dhabi. Everybody's there. So when you get that kind of nexus, when you get enough people, you get, critical mass, because investors are always looking at the other guy saying, where are you putting capital to work? And it was clear from that conference that, I haven't quite seen anything like that in any other real estate conference. I mean, we have one coming up in Washington, D.C., data center world that might be equivalent. It might be. But that's an area of real estate that a lot of investors like me are looking at. There's a tremendous amount of interest in that. And even that was discussed in the conference. Power is everything. I keep saying this over and over again. You can't build an economy without a low-cost, stable, and reliable power source. And I think, the kingdom's done a pretty good job on that one.
Well, we've been looking at pictures of you on the stage in Saudi Arabia at various events. Clearly, you've been going there for a long time. Just wondering if you could tell us when your first visit was, and you've obviously witnessed all this change. Any anecdotes from that first visit? I mean, anything really struck you when you first set foot in the kingdom?
Well, there was a perception that women weren't part of the economy when I went for the first time, and there's a lot of resistance. And I said, I don't believe that to be true. I think leadership now has understood the importance of that huge part of the workforce, but I'm going to go and I'm going to check it out for myself. I mean, that's the whole deal. You have to go. And it was pretty obvious to me within hours that it was massive change. And so that's very important. That, it's a perception versus reality issue on that. And there's still a perception that that's the case in Saudi Arabia, but it's not true. And I also think Rima has done a good job here stateside in representing the fact that women are very powerful within society, because she herself is so powerful here. She's so well respected. And, she's probably one of the best ambassadors the country's ever had, because everybody knows her, and she's very active, and she's very effective. She can get stuff done, and I think putting her in that position was a brilliant move.
Mr. O'Leary, your sentiment and perception of the kingdom, I think, is appreciated by many. Could you tell us, what do you think is the value of a show like the Riyal Deal?
Information. It's all about information. It's all about getting facts into the head and hands and eyes of investors. This is a long-term goal. You have to build trust with investors over decades. It doesn't happen overnight. Investors seek stable returns. They would love to get double-digit returns, and they'll go anywhere in the world to get it, because that's their mandate. I mean, the real money is in the sovereign wealth and pension plans where, managers, and I put myself in that basket. Where do we go? And on a portfolio basis, we're all happy to take geopolitical risk. I mean, we don't have to put it all in one place, but you want to check the boxes on the things that really matter. Is there law that you can rely on? Is it transparent? Can you find infrastructure that you can work with? And I say business infrastructure. How do you actually craft a deal? Do you have the lawyers? Do you have the banks? All of this stuff. And that's really what a show like this should be doing, is talking about the vertical pillars of the infrastructure that are available. So, you know, I think people want to know, okay, how does the banking system work? How do I transfer, you know, $1 billion? Where is it actually held? And how do I access it? And all of that stuff is going to matter. It's really going to matter, because that's the nature of what the investment opportunities are. They're multi-billion-dollar real estate opportunities and infrastructure opportunities and energy development opportunities. That's what I seek. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. And so, you know, it's important to get that information out there.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Kevin O'Leary, investor and host of the Shark Tank USA. A real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Well, as we've just been saying there, it has been quite the roller coaster week for markets right across the globe on the back of those sweeping tariffs, which have also raised some fears of a global recession. Ali, I just wanted to talk to you a bit more about these tariffs. You know, we've got baseline tariffs imposed on all countries around the world at 10%. What's the direct impact, do you think, of those tariffs on the Saudi economy specifically?
Well, Tom, first of all, we've all seen this movie before. There's been many instances of tariffs, embargoes, and other economic fluctuations. So that's the first point. The direct impacts are very minimal to Saudi Arabia, because the reality is that only around 5% of the exports from Saudi Arabia go to the US. In fact, Asian nations are the greatest trade partners. Now, from that 5%, a large percentage is actually crude oil, which is exempt from the tariffs. So the direct impact is quite limited, but this is not to say that there are risks that we don't need to be conscious of.
Okay, so direct impacts are minimal. What about sort of more indirect impacts of those tariffs on Saudi?
The obvious impact is the fluctuations in the oil price. And as we all know, although Saudi Arabia is working tirelessly to diversify away from oil, it is largely dependent for economic prosperity on the oil economy at the moment. So there's an inherent risk in that. However, I'll go back to my earlier point. You know, we've seen this movie before, right? 2008, 2016, 2018. I think Saudi Arabia has proven itself to be a very resilient nation. In each instance, we've seen fiscal policy kick in, we've seen austerity measures, we've seen all kinds of economic development measures being put in place. The greatest one perhaps being the launch of the Vision 2030 initiative in 2016. And in each instance, we've seen the nation thrive, prosper, and continue to build. Now, the indirect impact to the oil prices may see some slowdown in investor interest or some economic slowdown in other parts of the world. I think that's a double-edged sword. That could have some impact on the development measures that are being worked on in the kingdom. However, it could also make Saudi Arabia an even more favorable place for foreign investors to come and participate in the economic development.
Okay, so that's the impact of the tariffs. I want to talk a little bit more about President Trump's possible visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, his first destination of his first term in office, of course. And it looks like it's going to be the first foreign trip of President Trump's second term in office. Do we know anything more about that, Ali?
Well, so far we can infer what the purpose of the trip will be. We have some record of his previous trip in his first term. And I think if the latest affairs are any indication, it's clear that trade flows and trade relationships are top of the agenda. And they're top of the agenda for both sides, perhaps. Now, I won't infer all of the topics of discussion, but what we have seen earlier this year is His Excellency Minister Al Ibrahim, speaking at Davos, mentioned that that Saudi Arabia is looking to expand trade to $600 billion with the US. And this is between the public, private sectors, procurement, and investment flows. So once again, if that's any indication, it's compounding or compiling the latest affairs with the whole tariff mess and the discussions surrounding that, taking into account the indications from the Saudi leadership on the appetite for investment expansion, I would predict that this is going to be a major focus of his first trip.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you in just a moment, Ali. Thanks for that. We'll be right back after this. Well, let's take a quick look now at some of the other major business stories from the kingdom. The General Authority of Civil Aviation officially grants Riyadh Air an air operator's certificate. This confirms that Saudi Arabia's newest carrier is fully compliant with necessary regulations and safety standards. Well, the company's CEO, Tony Douglas, says that the airline will be ready to begin operations later on this year. The Saudi oil firm Aramco says it has discovered 14 oil and natural gas fields and reservoirs. This in the kingdom's eastern region and the Empty Quarter. All the oil is reported to be of varying grades, totaling more than 8,000 barrels per day, while the natural gas could total more than 80 million standard cubic feet per day. Tesla has this week started selling cars in Saudi Arabia with the opening of its first showroom and service center in Riyadh. There will also be showrooms in Jeddah and Daman, while Tesla's Model 3, Model Y and Cybertruck will all be on sale. And this marks a new chapter in the company's global expansion. It comes at a time of falling global sales for Tesla. Well, Tesla's Saudi debut comes roughly a year after that of the Chinese giant BYD, which opened its Riyadh showroom last May. Well, electric vehicle sales in the kingdom totaled just 2,000 last year, so clearly there is scope for major growth, not least because people in Saudi Arabia cover more kilometers per year than people in many other markets. This is what the Saudi Arabia general manager of BYD, Carlos Montenegro, had to say.
The Saudi market is also very particular because the amount of kilometers per year that the user does is significantly higher than other markets. There is also a lot of intercity trips, so it would be very normal that a consumer will do, in a year 40,000 kilometers on its car.
Well, in line with Vision 2030, which will see the Saudi economy diverse away from oil, the kingdom is investing heavily in developing the EV sector. Ali, I just wanted to ask you a bit more because it seems like there's a serious opportunity here for EVs in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest items of the agenda, industrially speaking. And I think we've seen enough examples of the fact that when the Saudi leadership gets behind an industry or an objective, it mobilizes, pardon the pun. And the electric vehicles have been, they've been one of the main focuses of the economic development agenda that's been set in motion by Vision 2030. Lucid vehicles being one of the largest investments in the automotive space that PIF has made, north of around $8 billion so far, with a manufacturing plant now in Kingdom. This is in addition to SEER, which is Saudi's first homegrown electric vehicle brand, partnering with the likes of Rimac and BMW to bring technology in what will become a premier vehicle. And with the entry of Tesla, BYD already being dominant, in addition to that, EV charging infrastructure being rolled out at rapid pace by PIF entity, EVIQ, amongst others. I think this is an industry that's going to flourish very quickly, very rapidly, and we'll see this become a dominant space in the near future.
All right, so a lot more EVs on the roads across Saudi Arabia by the sounds of things. Well, as Saudi Arabia works its way towards its renewable energy goals, one locally bred firm has been playing its part in the country's green energy success ever since 2004, in fact. ACWA Power, a developer, investor and operator of power generation and desalination plants, now has a presence in 13 countries across the Middle East, Africa and parts of Asia. Well, I'm joined now by the CEO of ACWA Power, Marco Arcelli. Marco, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us here on The Riyal Deal. Let's just start by introducing ACWA Power to our audience. You've been at the helm for just over 2 years, I believe. Tell us a bit about the structure of the company and tell us as well what your main revenue streams are.
ACWA Power is one of the big success stories of Saudi Arabia and Saudi entrepreneurship. It's a company that was founded 20 years ago, and the founding members are still part of the shareholder structure. And they were joined a few years ago by PIF when Saudi Arabia launched this big decarbonization program and assigned to PIF and to ACWA Power on behalf of PIF the responsibility of building 70% of the renewables in the country. which means about 130 gigawatt between now and 2030. So it's a massive effort that we're doing to take out 268 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions by 2030. It's phenomenal what's going on. And then a few years ago, about 2.5 years ago, the company was listed on the stock exchange. It's been a very big success. Of course, we're now facing some volatility in the market, but the stock price multiplied in the last few years. So today we have roughly 80% owned by PIF and the founding families, and the rest is a free float on the stock exchange. We have about $100 billion of investments that we have made and we are making in projects that are about 60% in Saudi Arabia and 40% in 13 other countries that go from Morocco to China, from Uzbekistan to South Africa. And that is telling you how basically this excellence of Saudi Arabia in renewable energy, combined cycles, water desalination, and green hydrogen and green ammonia, we're turning Saudi Arabia from the largest exporter of oil to, inshallah, the largest exporter of decarbonization and water desalination technologies.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about water because, I mean, we tend to think, don't we, of places in Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Gulf in general, as being arid and having water supply issues. It is so simple and such an important building block for a thriving country. Just tell us a bit about desalination. I mean, are we seeing the technology behind it evolving? What's going on? What's exciting in that line of your business?
Our company, ACWA Power, has been a leader in driving efficiency in desalination over the past 20 years. And in particular, I would quote that in the last 15, we were able to decrease the amount of electricity, the amount of energy that is required to produce 1 cubic meter of water, of potable water, by more than 80%. So we went from more than 15 kilowatt hour per cubic meter, a cubic meter is 1,000 liter, to less than 3. We're today at about 2.7 in the plants, the newest plants that we operate. So that is one thing. The second thing is to employ renewable energy. So increasingly, I'm calling it green water, what we're doing. We have a very large scale, I think the largest scale application of 100% green water application at the Red Sea Global Development on the west coast of Saudi Arabia. But increasingly in our plants, included in Dubai and in Saudi Arabia, we employ solar panels next to the plant so that about a third of the power need is generated locally, so you don't have to rely on the grid, so you don't put pressure on the grid, and you can reduce the amount of electricity and the cost of electricity to generate 1 cubic meter of water. That is why today, with this in mind, with artificial intelligence that we are applying basically to the process so that the use of all the additives and chemicals that are needed to be put into the water, you know, to all the minerals like calcium, magnesium, to make it potable, are reduced by more than 30% through these artificial intelligence instruments that we are using. And also through a greater emphasis on analyzing all the distribution of the water and the discharge, we're making this one of the most sustainable technologies we can employ.
Okay, so it sounds like AI is helping you to generate much greater efficiencies. You're already on track for a much more efficient process in desalination of water. And it sounds to me very much like ACWA Power, and you said this sort of, you alluded to this in your first answer, is really central to those renewable goals that Saudi Arabia has set itself.
It is indeed. So as the provider of 70% of the renewables under the PIF program, that means on average we're going to build 14 gigawatt per year. As a matter of fact, today with the backlog that we have, we already have more than 20 gigawatt under construction. We already have 4 gigawatt in operations, and that's just a few years since we started. So the ramp up is phenomenal, and this gives us also great opportunities to leverage the relationship with the key supply chain contractors, OEM suppliers, to be able to achieve the lowest cost. We recently declared the low bidder on 800 megawatt in Morocco. We expanded in China. We're the biggest investors in Central Asia. We're also the biggest investor in Africa. We have $15 billion in Central Asia, $9 billion in Africa. So you see how this volume, this scale, the ingenuity that we put, the optimization that we put along the value chain, including financing, allow us to bring the most competitive solution to the countries that need it the most. 80% of the new energy demand is in emerging markets. 3/4 of this is going to be renewable. So we are a big part in providing support to the local communities with affordable, secure electricity and water to stabilize economies and to foster local growth.
Okay, so clearly ACWA Power is absolutely central to many of Saudi Arabia's ambitions, providing water such a key role that you are fulfilling. Just tell us how that fits in and how ACWA Power fits in with the mega projects, the projects like NEOM, for example.
Typically, we supply the grid, and so the two buyers, SPPC for power and SWPC for water. But we have two notable exceptions. One is in the NEOM area, we're building together with NEOM and Air Products the world's largest green ammonia plant with the lowest cost, arguably in the world, because it's the only large-scale project that is under construction today in the world. It's 2,000 megawatt of electrolyzer. To give you an idea, the largest plant in operation in Europe today is about 20. So that is 100 times bigger. So it's a technological marvel. I was just visiting the site a few days ago, and I'm really pleased with the process and the progress. The second is in Red Sea Global. We are providing all the utilities. So the power generation, we're providing the water desalination, we're providing wastewater treatment, and we're providing district cooling. There we have a phenomenal solution where basically we're taking the wastewater from all these resorts, and then we are letting the nutrients, so the ammonia that is in this wastewater, deposit and grow mangrove forest. Basically, we're turning the desert green, and then the residual water goes to the local nursery, where they're growing more than 30 million trees and bushes for the landscaping of the magnificent resorts where tourists will go. So those are the two biggest involvement in the giga projects.
Okay, and when you mentioned hydrogen, I mean, hydrogen looks like it's on track to become perhaps one of your most important, one of the most important pillars of ACWA Power.
Correct. I think we're a big believer. Hydrogen is, and green hydrogen, probably the only way other than electrification where we are going to be able to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors. The carbon content of power generation by more than 60%, but arguably very little was done on hard-to-abate sectors, fertilizers, aviation, mobility, refineries, and so on. So we believe in this technology to address this need. Then, of course, there is a question today with all the volatility that you see around the world, and people are saying, well, should we still pursue that at scale, considering that it might have a cost, and can we afford it in the short term? And I view it slightly different, because it not only brings decarbonization, but it also brings security of supply and stability of prices. So effectively, if you are bringing and using green hydrogen in Europe or in Japan today, effectively, you are reducing gas consumption. And that goes to the stability of your supply, the security of your supply. We have seen the big shocks that Europe observed with the Russia-Ukraine war. The other thing is it brings stability of prices. Some people are questioning and wondering, is this more expensive than gray hydrogen? And I say it depends on the commodity price. So if you have very high gas prices in Europe, there are times when producing gray ammonia is more expensive than producing green hydrogen in Saudi Arabia. So what this product gives you is a different type of product, not volatile, with a fixed price, which is something that I think increasingly industries and investors want to see to be able to take industrial decisions to site investments.
Okay, so clearly renewables are a huge segment of the economy there in Saudi Arabia. Where do you see it heading to? And just give us a sense of the size potentially of the market.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia in this big decarbonization program has a target of moving to a 50-50 gas and oil and gas-fired generation and renewable by 2030. It's well advanced. The renewable part will be about 130 gigawatt, of which, as I mentioned, 70% will be realized by ACWA Power. And you see the progress. There's announcements month after month. So the speed has really reached a cruising speed, and the program will be delivered soon.
Okay, and just lastly and briefly, if you don't mind, I mean, clearly lots of regional successes to ACWA Power's name. Are you seeing any big challenges on a sort of at a global level? And how is ACWA Power managing to navigate those challenges?
As I mentioned, 80% of the global energy needs are in developing economies and emerging economies. So of that, 75%, 3/4 are renewables. Renewables are not built today because of ideology. They're built because they're the cheapest, the fastest, the simplest technologies to install. So the growth of these technologies will happen if the economy will grow, as we expect that it will, except for any short-term volatility that you may have. The more you're able to lower the cost, the more there is adoption. So if you go to emerging economies, for instance, in Africa, and you connect people to the grid or industries to the grid, first they light up, lights, then they charge the phone, and then they install a refrigerator, and then pretty soon the per capita consumption increases a lot. And so that's a natural virtuous cycle. So I'm not worried about the growth of renewables. And increasingly, I see finally a pragmatic approach to growth in energy and to energy transition. So if you want to install more renewables, you need to have more resilient grids. To have more resilient grids, it means that you need to have ways to store it. You can use battery storage, but also combined cycles that are gas-fired. Emissions that you get from these are way lower than any other alternative, and certainly lower than the energy that they displace from coal and oil-fired. So those two technologies, together with batteries, we see that are going to be centerline in the growth in the world and very solid for the remaining decades.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. We're out of time, but a real pleasure talking to you, Marco Arcelli, and hearing all about ACWA Power and its ambitions. Thank you very much indeed for being with us on The Riyal Deal. Okay, so really interesting talking there to the CEO of ACWA Power. And it sounds, obviously like a really key entity and a real engine in Saudi Arabia's future in terms of powering all of these big projects. And hydrogen really stood out for me as being a massive potential opportunity as well.
Yeah, so, by now we all know that the power requirements of societies, economies, anywhere in the world are increasing at breakneck speed, and Saudi is no exception to that. The vast amount of data center facilities, the infrastructure, the urban development that's taking place is going to require significant amounts of power infrastructure. And moving forward, Saudi Arabia has an intention to continue to be a supplier of energy to the world, but perhaps start increasing more of the sustainable energy supply of the world, and hydrogen is a big part of that. ACWA Power is one of the enterprises playing a significant role in that development, and I think we'll see much more to develop in that area going forward.
I think we will. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about ACWA Power in the future. Well, that brings us towards the end of this, the very first edition of The Riyal Deal. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. If you've got any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Please do reach out to me or to Ali on X or on LinkedIn. But for now, that's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Thanks for watching.